Welcome to the Bay. Today we're docking at a question that trips up a ton of builders, especially in the used market. We're looking at two sibling cards, the RTX 3070 and the RTX 3070 Ti. They look so similar on paper, but there's one huge question. Which one is actually the right harbor for your money today?
All right, let's get right into the tail of the tape. In one corner, you've got the RTX 3070, what we all call the efficiency king. It's just solid, balanced, sensible. And in the other corner, you have the RTX 3070 Ti, the bruiser, the pure 1440p rasterization champ, for raw gaming power without all the fancy ray tracing stuff.
And here's where it gets tricky, because the performance gap between these two, it's consistently just 5 to 10%. That's it. For such a tiny difference, the decision gets surprisingly complicated. So, which card is actually the smart play for your next build?
Look, we know you're here for answers, not a long, drawn-out journey. So we're going to give you the verdict right now, up front. Then, we'll break down exactly how we got to that conclusion. So here it is, the whole story in a nutshell. Yeah, the 3070 Ti is faster, no one's debating that. But, and this is a huge but, that little speed boost comes at a very real cost, an extra 70 watts of power. And believe me, that one number changes everything.
So let's get into the nitty-gritty. Time for the performance showdown. We're going to look at the raw numbers, the frames per second, to see what that 5–10% difference really looks like when you're in the game.
Let's take a demanding game, right? Cyberpunk 2077 at 1440p. What are we talking about here? A difference of just 6 frames per second, 72 versus 78. I mean, sure, it's an improvement, but is it a game changer? Are you going to feel those 6 frames? For most of us, probably not.
And this trend? It's the same story across the board. You look at Hogwarts Legacy, Forza, even high refresh rate titles like Warzone and Fortnite. It's the same deal. The T always gives you a small, consistent bump, but it never ever pulls away and delivers a fundamentally different experience.
And this brings us to the really important stuff, the hidden costs, the things that don't show up on a spec sheet but can totally make or break your build. We're talking about power, heat, and the real-world impact on your rig. Because, let's be honest, a few extra frames just aren't worth it if your PC sounds like a jet engine taking off.
Just look at the power draw side by side. The 3070 is pretty respectable, sipping about 220 watts when it's working hard. The 3070 Ti, for that tiny little performance gain, is gulping down 290 watts. That is a massive jump.
Let's just stare at that number for a second. An extra 70 watts. That isn't just a slightly higher electricity bill, folks. That is 70 extra watts of energy that has to go somewhere. And inside a PC case, somewhere always means one thing: heat.
And all that extra heat? Well, it starts a chain reaction. First, you'll need a bigger, beefier power supply. NVIDIA recommends a 750-watt unit just for the Ti. Second, all that heat has to get out of your case, which can lead to your GPU throttling itself if you don't have amazing airflow. And third, it almost guarantees your fans are going to have to spin way faster and way louder.
Okay, so how do we make sense of all this for our wallets? We have to look at the value, the actual frames per second you get for every single dollar you spend. This is where the smart choice usually becomes crystal clear.
And when you look at typical prices, well, the math doesn't lie. The standard RTX 3070 just gives you more performance for your money. The Ti, while technically faster, just isn't fast enough to justify that price hike. You end up paying a pretty big premium for a really small upgrade.
So let's bring this all back to the workbench. We've seen the benchmarks, we've talked about the heat, we've done the math. Now it's time to actually pick the right component for your specific build.
So here's our final recommendation. If you're building a quiet, cool, and efficient rig, get the RTX 3070. If you're just looking for the absolute best bang for your buck, get the RTX 3070. It's just the smarter, more balanced choice. The only time you should even consider the 3070 Ti is if you find one for almost the same price as the regular one, and you absolutely must have every last frame, no matter the cost in power and heat.
Now, GPU prices are always changing, right? The used market can be a total roller coaster. So for the absolute latest pricing and a much deeper analysis of these cards, you should definitely check out the full breakdown for this explainer over at bestgpusforgaming.com.
And that leaves us with one last question to chew on.
With all the new stuff out there like DLSS 3, frame generation, and the super efficient 40 series cards, is sticking with the older 30 series architecture still the smartest move? Well, that's a question every builder has to answer for themselves. Keep it cool and keep building.